Hello, I'm Yusuf Aram, and welcome to this special edition of Strait Talk from the Antalya Diplomacy Forum. Join me as I dive into this annual gathering of state leaders, diplomats, academics, and policy experts on how they think the world is shaping out. The international system is entering a period of uncertainty not seen since the end of the Second World War. Conflicts are raging in Europe and the Middle East. Trade wars are pitting the world's two largest economies against each other. Amid this global turmoil, diplomacy is seeing its stock rise. The ADF is bringing together leading experts to break down how the world will tackle these challenges, especially in trouble spots like Syria. We're on the sidelines of the Antalya Diplomacy Forum, and I'm joined by a panel of experts to discuss the Middle East. Fadel Abdul Ghany, founder and head of the Syrian Network for Human Rights. Luisa Fantappie, head of the Mediterranean, Middle East, and Africa program at the International Affairs Institute. And Salman Shaikh, founder and CEO of the Shaikh Group. Thanks for joining me. Fadel, let's start with you. I want to talk about what's happening in Syria right now, and just very simply, what is happening in your view?
Thanks for having me. I think that Syria is facing five main challenges, the new authority. The first one is, this is the most serious one, is Israel attitude and behavior against the Syrian new authority. The second one is the sanction. The third one is the internal security. The fourth one is we can add the political engagement from the authority toward the community. So let's go one by one. I think the most serious one is the Israeli attack. Since day one, they targeted and they eliminate the Syrian army capability, 90% being destroyed. Until recent days, they still attacking Syria, violating the sovereignty, but also destroying rusted weapons. So there is no mean for those attacks. It's a political message that they are the upper hand against the new authority. The second one is the sanction. Sanction is heavily affecting the new authority. There is a minor left of the sanction, but there is still the heavy sanction, mainly against the central bank. Without SWIFT code, there will be no company is willing to engage in Syria reconstruction or on any movement toward their interest in Syria. I think without movement from the US and eliminate the Israel threats against the new government, my argument that they are pushing the new authority toward Iran. They want to eliminate Iran and Russia access, but at the same time, by offering nothing to the new authority, on contrary, they are pushing it toward this access. And we clearly heard yesterday the Russian ambassador at the UN Security Council taking step toward the new authority and condemning Israel attack, offering economic support and all of that. The third point actually is the SDF threat in west Syria, in the northeast Syria, and there is other threat is the south with the doors connecting with the Israeli. Those are heavily affecting the new authority because huge territory is still out of the government control. The fourth one is the government engagement with the Syrian themselves. I think the new authority need to be more open, more inclusion. They are still conservative. We noticed that in the formulation of the army, and they are getting pressure from outside, from this one of the US condition. I don't prefer to hear this from outside. I think this should be the government attitude, to be open with the all Syrian, and those Syrian to be included in this transition toward diversity, toward democracy as well. The fourth point is the transitional justice path, which is still not yet exist until now. This actually is a very sensitive due to the heavy and intensive violations being committed against the Syrian past 14 years. And I think it's been delayed. Swift action need to be taken under the umbrella of the independency of the jurisdiction in Syria and formulation of the new transitional justice committee. This should be, it need to be independent to send a message for the whole Syrian that this path is inclusion and they are taking a neutral toward all victims, regardless of their sectarian or religion or political vision. So those are the main challenges facing each one of them. It's a considerable amount of effort needed by the new authority.
Maria, Fadel touched on sanctions. Now, you're based in Rome. In my talks with European officials, most recently Kaya Kallas, HRVP, there's a desire to do something in Syria, help rebuild. Now, obviously sanctions, there's some easing, probably some more on the way if Syria meets basic criteria. How do you view the EU's role in the future of Syria? Will it be very hands-on?
Thank you for having me, first of all. And well, I mean, I think that there is a fundamental question here that EU approach towards Syria cannot be disentangled by EU approach towards the entire Middle Eastern stability. I mean, in one sense, I mean, Syria's stability and the region's stability are connected to each other, because we know very well that, especially in the delicate phase of political transition, if there is war, a regional competition going, this can be really affecting an already delicate transition. And on the other hand, we know that when there is a transition at play, many actors can get regional connection and actually fuel and foster even more regional conflict. So there is an interdependence between the two. So I think that the EU role first should be that one of understanding what is the main node of conflict in the region, which is the Israel-Palestinian conflict. So without, like, I think, a cohesive and coherent also approach towards this, and especially I think there is a role for Europe to play in everything that relates to supporting a peaceful resolution to this conflict. There is many regional initiatives, in particularly the Global Alliance for the Two-State Solution, the Gaza Contact Group, that the EU can, like in some way support. This would be a first step. Then there are like things that are specifically Syria related that EU can do. And I think that it will be very important to, first of all, rethink a broader European framework to approach Syria, potentially a new EU-Syria strategy to confront and to face and engage the country in this new phase of history. As you were mentioning, there has been steps toward relieving sectorial sanctions on Syria. However, let me also say something that in some way, nobody would like to be in a difficult place like the president of Syria now is. It's a difficult process to handle. It's a difficult job. But at the same time, it's also a job that in some way Europe can help, in some way support some of the things to go in the right direction. One is, for example, that one of how to handle the transitional justice. We know that, especially in the last month, there has been retaliation against specific groups in the coast. This is very concerning. We know that there is an uneven and uncompleted process of discussion with the Northeast. And in some way, we all have interest, and Europe has interest in Syria's stability. So I do think, specifically with regards to the transitional justice, but also to the discussion on decentralization, there are key things in which Europe can play a role. Decentralization can be not incompatible with a strong and efficient state. And I think that there are many voices which have participated to the opposition to Assad, not only those ones who are now ruling in Damascus, and it's important for the prosperity and the stability of Syria that all will have also a voice in shaping the future of what Syria will become.
As we were talking about Ahmed al-Shara, I just watched him pass behind us a minute ago.
Well, the foreign ministry.
So while we're talking about him, he's passing behind us.
Yes.
Salman, Maria is saying he's in a tough position, very tough job. How do you view and how do you evaluate his near 6-month performance so far? Do you view it as adequate? Is he doing what's necessary?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here. It's lovely to be back in this wonderful forum. Look, it's a work in progress and it's going to be difficult, but I must say there is a certain level of stability which has been established in Syria, and Syria has been walking down a transitional pathway, which by and large I think Syrians are accepting, which is now the latest stage of which is the establishment of a transitional government. And of course, Mr. al-Shara being president and an executive being put in place. But it is only the start. And it comes in the context of a region which is massively changing in the last year and a half. And in fact, in the context of a geopolitical environment, which I think is epoch changing. We don't know exactly where we are going in terms of the broader international system. So it's in that context that Syria and other countries in the Middle East, particularly Lebanon and Iraq, have to develop as nation states and as modern nation states. And let me just say on that, I don't think there's been such an opportunity for more than a generation and a half, maybe in the last 50, 60 years, for Syria since the 1950s. For Lebanon, certainly since the 1970s or so, and in Iraq too, for many, many decades. And why is that? Iran is weakening. We do have Israel as an expansionist power. We have the Russians retreating somewhat, given their own security and issues related to Ukraine. And then we have a very unpredictable United States. In that, there's a vital role that we now see from the Gulf as strategic partners of the international system, as well as regionally, and of Turkey as a strategic bridge builder in that context. Now going forward, I believe there are three particular issues which have to be addressed. The first, and let's focus on Syria, which we started with, it's state building. I wrote a paper some years ago about national dialogues and state building. It can only be done through internal dialogue processes which are inclusive. And certainly I've had the pleasure in the work that we've done over the last 14, 15 years of engaging with Syrians with incredible capabilities now, running their organizations, working through the issues, discussing these. These have to be involved at multi-levels, whether it's at the official level or at the more societal level. That's the first. The second, and linked to that, is how do you integrate military forces which build the security and defense of a nation? And for Syria, that's very current, given the challenges it faces and the post-Assad environment, particularly with those that were in the regime, but also in terms of its borders, and we see that very much with regards to Israel. But we also see it in Lebanon, in terms of how you deal with Hezbollah, or in Iraq, in terms of how you deal with those Iraqi militias. That cannot be a zero-sum game either. It has to be done step by step, but the direction of travel has to be arms under the authority of the government itself in all these cases. And the final is regional and international cooperation. You know, you can draw a line now from the Eastern Mediterranean, which is where Europe has a great role to play, all the way to the Gulf. But that line, unlike the old Belt and Road that the Chinese have, or IMEC that has been drawn up by the Gulf, by the Indians, by the Israelis and Europe, it cannot now exclude the Levant. It cannot exclude Lebanon, Syria, and Iraq. And I think that's the challenge ahead of us. Not a zero-sum game here, but where you can build greater connectivity and greater practical projects, whether it's cables, electricity, transportation, trade, I think that's where the future stability and prosperity lies for the region.
Fadel, I want to talk a little about the presser between Donald Trump and Netanyahu. And in it, Netanyahu talked about Turkey playing a role in Syria, saying that Israel viewed it as a threat. It seems that the Syrians want Turkey to have some type of military or security presence inside to help with the security situation. How is that going to move forward? Because on one side you have Israel moving from southwestern Syria inside, their occupation is increasing. Obviously the Syrians seem to want to work with the Turks regarding security. Israel saying that's provoking me. Trump saying let me negotiate, let me mediate. How do you see that dynamic playing out?
In the Syrian point of view, Israel is the main threat. Israel is occupying a lot of territories, and they are like building a lot of points, military point, and even civic point as well. So they are remaining, and they are acknowledging that. Even furthermore, they are acknowledging that they are going to extend this occupation. They are striking, destroying the Syrian sovereignty and the military capability as well. So in the Syrian point of view, Israel is the main threat, not Turkey. In order to have this balance, Syria decided to engage Turkey to create this balance and protection. There is no other way. Actually, Israel is pushing the Syrian government toward even Iranian or the Turkish authority. So we choose Turkey, not Iran, because Iran is created a huge massacres, violation against the Syrian people. So this is the argument, and I think Trump engagement in this balancing, and we saw as Azerbaijan talk between the Turks and the Israeli is essential here, because we don't want Syria to be a land war and the proxy war between we fed up from the proxy war past 14 years. Syria have been a proxy war for many nations. Now, in order to sustain the stability, there is no alternative but to support this transition period. We don't want this experience to fail. What's Israel want? Israel interest Syria to remain unstable by engaging in between the Syrian community. They are engaging with the Druze and the Kurd as well, which is against the Syrian will and against the Syrian interest. I think the Trump administration is well aware about this, and they are here disagree little bit, I can see, with Israel vision towards Syria, and I think without international support, Syria will never survive from this critical transition period.
Maria, I want to ask you about ISIS. Now, obviously the terror group nowhere near as big of a threat as it was at its peak 6-7 years ago, but there's still a presence. There's still cells inside Syria, around Iraq. Over the past couple months, we've seen the region kind of coming together. There was a meeting in Jordan. There was a meeting in Turkey, some regional actors coming together, Syria, Iraq, Turkey, Lebanon, the Jordanians. And it seems that they're trying to find a way forward in the absence of America, how to provide regional security, especially regarding counterterrorism. Do you see the region being able to provide meaningful security regarding this counterterrorism situation?
Look, you asked me this at the very right time, because while working on my book manuscript, I was consulting just a few days ago my archives from 2014, my notes, and I was reading my notes from Iraq, and I was thinking how that process actually happened, how it was possible that in June 2014, all of a sudden, soldiers left their uniforms, their weapons, and then there was such a sort of easy takeover from almost a third of a country. I think that my response to your question will be that there are two things that are an enabling factor for even a very small handful of fighters, because back then, imagine, people in Anbar were saying that only 100 fighters came actually to some of the city of Anbar, and then it fell. There are two factors that are enabling the rise of such an organization in different forms, even if there are a small number of fighters. One is state collapse, so the inability of nation states across the region to actually have efficient security structures, and also obviously corruption being, undermining the efficiency of those security and army, police, and so on. Second is the feeling of disenfranchisement that people at the local level, they can feel. This in some case can play a role in obviously creating an alliance, even if it's not an ideological alliance, but it's an alliance of convenience between people and jihadists. And actually, I said there are two, but there is three factors. The third factor is regional competition. Whenever there is no mechanism of regional cooperation and there is like regional powers competing against each other, this can really be an enabling factor, because it can in some way jeopardize also, it can in some way create an opening within fragile states for not having the right access to intelligence informations, or it can even pit like intelligence service one against the other and then create an opening for these fighters to raise. So in a short answer to your question is that yes, if there is not going to be regional cooperation mechanism, definitely there is an opportunity even for small cells to research. And yes, especially if in the Levant there is not going to be efficient states to be rebuilt, there could be opportunities actually for ISIS to research. ISIS has never been an issue when it comes to the numbers, but it's the enabling factors that make it a threat.
Salman, when we look back 5 years ago about the situation in the region, Iran was projecting power everywhere, proxy network, Hezbollah powerful in Lebanon, Shiite militia all over Syria and Iraq, Houthis in full power in parts of Yemen. Now we're looking at a very different picture. Iran expelled from Syria, Hezbollah greatly diminished, the Shiite presence in Iran diminished, the Houthis taking major hits from Israel and the United States as well. How is Iran reacting to this new dynamic right now? Because obviously it's not going to take this sitting down, but you have Donald Trump, who's quite hawkish. You have Netanyahu, who's quite hawkish. How do you see this dynamic shaping for Tehran?
There are many Irans, and I'm sure there's a very rich, deep debate, discussion going on within Iran. I think the wise path for Iranian leadership to pursue now is, of course, to lift the sanctions on it, ameliorate the suffering to the Iranian people themselves, and to focus on strengthening their own country through diplomacy and dialogue. And that's where I think it's important as we sit here, where we're on the eve of direct talks between the Americans and the Iranians on the nuclear deal. But what's important now, and what's on the agenda, is correcting the original sin of the first nuclear deal, which omitted Iran's regional interference in other countries. And we have to say that very clearly. Now that's on the table, as well as its missile technology and how it chooses to use it. So I hope that diplomacy and dialogue, direct contact between the US and Iran, supported by regional states, and I believe all of the leaderships that are here, for example, at this forum, would be supportive of that, would hope that those talks will make real and tangible progress. I think we've now seen that given that opportunity, regional states like Syria, regional leaders in Lebanon, we have, I think, a very good Lebanese government as well now, and in Iraq, are looking to strengthen and build their states so that there aren't vacuums, as Maria was saying, which are exploited by other non-state actors or by militias or proxies as such. That era now has to be over. If it's not, then I fear we're going to go through the same old cycles that we've gone through before. But I prefer to look through this in a more hopeful way. But one word here on Israel. You addressed to Fadel what the Israelis have been doing in establishing a buffer zone in Syria. I have a lot of sympathy, having lived in Israel, having lived in Gaza myself, for Israel's security. But it's not going to get security by breaking international law and acting as an international pirate, which is what it has done in the case of Syria as such. I think it's much more important that Israel also gets behind these direct talks on the nuclear issue, and we find a way whereby which in the end, we know what we're talking about. We're talking about the integration of Iran and Israel into the region. It cannot be an either or, it cannot be a zero sum. And if that's the path I think that we should be working towards.
Fadel, Maria, Salman, we're out of time. I don't know where the time went. This was really good. I want to do it again very soon. Thanks for the discussion.
Thank you for
Thank you for having us.
I'm Yusuf Ehrman. This was a special edition of Strait Talk from the Antalya Diplomacy Forum. Goodbye for now.